I have a question for you. When I say the words arsenic, mustard gas, and asbestos poisoning, what do you think of? I think of death, and with asbestos poisoning, a slow and agonizing death. On June 12, 2002, WHO, the World Health Organization, came out with the results of a multi-year study, and they concluded that diesel fuel exhaust caused cancer and other maladies from exposure to human beings. There have been many studies for many years, perhaps 25 or 30 years, that have come to the same conclusion. But it was just recently when this announcement came out in London, and because of the credibility of WHO, that people have taken notice. For example, this is the WHO document, and it was in London on June 12th that the results were presented. And what it essentially says is that diesel engine exhaust fumes can cause cancer in human beings and belong in the same potentially deadly category as asbestos, arsenic, and mustard gas. Now, I want you to think this through. On the one end of things that are good for you, I would probably think of organic tomatoes. And then WHO goes to the top, and they talk about the things that are most caustic to human beings. Again, we have mustard gas, it's intended to kill you. Arsenic is also intended to kill you. They have now included exhaust diesel. This has long been a concern of the state of California, and there have been multiple tests to determine this issue, i.e. the effect that diesel fuel exhaust has on human beings. I have on the board right now a study from 2000, and this is a Air Resource Board document. And what it says here is after their study, they conclude that diesel fuel is a toxic air contaminant, and it has a potential to cause cancer and other adverse health effects. So this is just one study that we brought here today. We have found studies from scholars, for example, who have made these, have looked at this material and have done case studies for the last 35 years, for example, from Harvard University. Now, the questions are, you think about it, who is exposed to enough diesel fumes to cause a problem? Well, again, in 2000, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, gave us some information. And what they told us was this. These are just a sampling. On-road, trucks, buses, motorhomes, off-road, construction vehicles, agricultural equipment, marine vessels, and then portables. For example, cranes are portable, drilling equipment, and portable pumps. And then stationary, you have power generators, stationary pumping equipment, and the list goes on and on. Closer to home, we have situations such as if you live close to a freeway and you're raising your children there, there may not be a more toxic environment. For example, once this information has come out, and once the media has got this information to people living in California, for example, I would hope that someone, for example, would go to a doctor and say, "Doctor, my little girl is wheezing when she breathes. We've lived next to a freeway our entire life. Can you help us?" This is the power of information. This is why we've asked you here today to help us get out the word. Now, when you read these studies, some of them mention some of the illnesses, others mention other illnesses. But everyone basically agrees on the following. Even partial or short-term exposure to diesel fumes can cause 22 types of cancer: heart attacks, heart disease, strokes, asthma, headaches, eye irritation, various lung diseases, and immune system disorders. And there are many more. Now, the person you see standing to my right is our client. He's the first client in this litigation, which will go on for many years. His name is Frank Schoenwald, and when we're done here, I would like you to feel free to ask him questions. But what I will tell you is this. Frank has spent 30 years in the trucking industry and the boating industry, and he has been breathing those caustic fumes the entire time. Now, I won't tell you exactly the injury he has, but I will tell you that it is a very serious cardiopulmonary disease. I've been asked, for example, how this litigation might go. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I think I know. We've been involved in many of these cases. And for example, if you want to understand the corporate mentality that goes into a case like this, I'd like you to refer you back to the Ford Pinto case. Now, some of you are much too young to recall that. Others do. This was a case where Ford Motor Company built a little car called the Pinto. It was very gas efficient. It was fun to drive and looked cute. And they sold millions of them. Well, what happened was, when the Pinto was struck from behind, it had these sharp bolts. And those sharp bolts would be pushed into the gas tank. That means the gas tank would explode. And when there was a rear-end collision, it would put the doors in a position where you couldn't open them. So hundreds and hundreds of people died horrible deaths by burning to death. We were able to find documents where Ford knew about this. And we actually got the letters where their accountants and their vice president said, this is the way we're going to look at this. To recall all of those cars and bring them back and replace those bolts, it's going to cost, let's say, $10. But if we fight each lawsuit, at the end of the day, that's going to cost us $5. So at the end, even though these deaths have occurred, we'll make a $5 profit. I tell you that story because this could be a similar case. Diesel fuel came about in the 1890s. I believe, and I don't know this, I don't have a crystal ball, but it is going to be very possible, we'll find, that the manufacturers, Big Oil, knew very early on that diesel fuel caused cancer and other types of illnesses. I believe we may find that not only did they know it, they hid the information. Again, no guarantees, but I wouldn't be surprised if this information comes out during the course of discovery in this litigation. Now, once the suit is filed, which we have just filed, I would expect that they will hire the best law firms in the country. They will pay huge amounts of money to those law firms and attempt to drag this out, let's say, 10 to 15 years. Now, think it through. If they're able to do that, they should be able to make enough money during that 10 to 15 years to fund not only the litigation, but all of the settlements. You have to remember, it's not bad business. Corporations, they don't have hearts, they don't have conscience. Their duty is to make money for their shareholders. And with diesel fuel, as long as they can keep it on the market, they will make a profit. I also believe that we'll get the numbers on the money they've made since 1898, and it will be probably trillions. And when this thing is all over, if the plaintiffs, meaning the people who are dead or dying, receive even 1% of that, I'd be surprised. There's one other thing I'd like to tell you, and please bear with me. At the end I think it's really a good story. When was the last time you heard a good story about cancer? I'd like to tell you. My mother's 77 years old. She smoked 2 packs of cigarettes from age 12 to age 70. So surprised, she has lung cancer. This was about 2 years ago. We get her to the best clinic in the country, MD Anderson. It's essentially a death sentence. She had 3% of making it 2 years. But they utilize this new machine, proton therapy. I think there are 2 in the world, 1 there and 1 in Florida State. They put her into treatment, 6 months, intensive therapy, burns on her chest. She comes out. They said, come back in 3 months, we're going to do a PET scan to see how you're doing. She comes back in 3 months. The doctor comes in, he throws the exams, the x-rays on the table and said, you're not going to believe this. You're not in remission, you're cancer-free. Well, aside from being very excited, the doctor said to her, you have no idea how significant this is. This means this treatment will completely change the statistics on cancer. This is why I point this out. If we're able to get this information to the public, we'll have people in the early stages of cancer, for example, who will go to their doctor and say, I've been exposed to this for years. The doctor will do a scan, and he may find cancer in the early stages. They can then get the type of treatment my mother got at MD Anderson, and perhaps they can survive. Perhaps their children won't have a parent who dies, and their lives can go after treatment on as normal. We're not talking about gasoline, we're talking about diesel. And the answer is they can do a lot. There are patents on diesel fuel that really have 1% of the contaminants that they now have. Now, California has attempted to fix that. I think by 2012, trucks are supposed to be modified so that new engines at least, have to be efficient. Now, that means we still have a lot of the older trucks on the road that are polluting. But it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter for future generations, but it's kind of like an Aaron Brockovich situation where this company had been polluting for years and years and years and causing cancer for years and years and years, and then they say, well, look, we cleaned it up. Everything's okay. Well, it's not, because the people who were exposed 5, 10, and 15 years ago are becoming ill and dying. It's the same situation we have here. So my hope is they recognize that there are people who have been injured or have died, or who have suffered other injuries, and they will help those folks get the kind of medical care they need, and if they can't work anymore, help them support their families. So I guess the answer is twofold. Let's get these folks compensation so they can go on and get medical care and support their families, and 2, force the issue with the oil companies to clean up their act. Now, we're talking about California. This is a worldwide problem. If you go to a nation like Pakistan or India, you can't even see through the air to notice the car next to you. That still has to change. You can't kill people in other countries because their government isn't forceful. So those are my thoughts on what we're trying to do. If you become ill and you can't drive that truck and you die, who supports your family? I don't know. If you don't have health insurance because you can't work and drive your truck, how do you get the kind of care that is going to save you from this illness? Money does that. Let's face it, that's what this is about. If there were ever defendants that could afford to take care of a problem like this, it would be big oil. They can well afford to clean up their mess. We have a wonderful judicial system that levels the playing field for victims like Mr. Schoenwald, and when he's in a lawsuit against Shell Oil, because at the end of the day, if it's a state court judge, or at the end of the day, when it's a federal judge, we have a level playing field. And just because they're a 800-pound gorilla, we can fight them punch by punch. Now, as far as how large this litigation is, I'm with you. It's really hard to wrap your head around this. But I believe as time goes on, we will. Think about asbestos poisoning. We had the same concerns very early on. How in the world can we take care of these thousands and hundreds of thousands of naval shipmen, of contractors, carpenters, children who went to school in schools that were full of asbestos? Well, those companies had enough money to take care of it. The money was put into a fund, and one case at a time, these folks are being compensated. Yes, it's a huge undertaking, but it's an undertaking which we're willing to go forward on. The question is, why are you a part of this lawsuit?
To make it better for everyone. If they would clean up all the soot from the trucks and the shippings and the railroad and all the big trucks and everything on the road, if they were accountable for it, we wouldn't have to breathe it as much. It wouldn't be all over the place. And California, like they have so many rules, well, other parts of the world, they don't have anything. So everybody's breathing this stuff and wearing this stuff. I drove a trucking company for 22 years. I have a boat that has a diesel motor. I have a motorhome with a diesel motor. I have a generator as a diesel motor. My family was in a busing business back when I was real little. I wrenched on motors for years and years. I was always around it. I have a breathing problem. I've been to many specialists throughout the year, and they can't find out what it is. I have a wheezing. Sometimes I can't breathe real well.
Here's the thing. I allowed you to ask him some questions about how he's feeling, but obviously this is an issue for experts. And we do have appointments for him to see specialists. And you asked a very good question, and that question is this, and you should ask it, and that is, well, if somebody has cancer or an upper respiratory problem, how do we know it wasn't caused by exhaust fumes or the fact that they smoked or the fact that they did other things? That's difficult but not impossible. And in fact, there are two experts, one in Sweden, one in France, who have developed a test for biomarkers to tell you if in fact your body has diesel exhaust in it or has. So we will be able to prove that. And yes, Frank right now is one of those people that local doctors say, I'm not sure. Because you know what? Local doctors don't know the information we're discussing here today. What I'm thinking is, instead of dragging these folks through 10 years of litigation, making them go to multiple doctors, having them questioned by endless attorneys many, many times, yeah, set up a medical system to figure out whether or not it was a diesel exhaust that caused their problems, and set up a matrix. I mean, for example, people with the worst injury are at the top of the compensation list, to the bottom. And that way we would reduce the additional damage to these people by not dragging them through the system. It would also save hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in attorney's fees cost. In California, a class action, you require commonality. And what that means is every single plaintiff has the same damage. An example would be Dell sold a computer to you where they said the screen was 12 inches and it was 10. That means every purchaser has the same issue. When you have a case like this, you have some people that have a wheezing, you have some people who have beginning cancer, you have some people that have died. So in a class action, you can't do that here. It's not possible. It's against the California Rules of Civil Procedure.